Welcome to Give It a Nudge. Today is going to be an absolute bring the house down episode because it is about saving for houses, and that's a topic that everyone is wanting to talk about. So I want to welcome to the show today Stephen Zilioli from PostLock. Steve, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I put Steve and Stephen in the same sentence, so we're covered, and now I'm going to stick with Steve.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Thanks, Steve.
So this is such an interesting business that you are beginning to build, both here and in the UK. And we'll talk about both and why you've gone to the UK so early. But before we get into that, we'll go into your history. And before we get into that, a little bit of an elevator pitch from you so the audience understand. What is PostLock?
Sure. PostLock is a better way to save for home deposits. The challenge for when most people save for home, they put their money in the bank. And the challenge is you get may get 1 or 2% from the bank, but the challenge, you're chasing a market that's going up 7, 8, 9, 10% per year. And there's nothing they can do about it. So for most buyers, they're faced with a really awkward decision. Do they save more? Do they invest in riskier assets, or do they just give up? PostLock's designed to solve that by enabling them to invest their money safely and get a return based on where they want to buy, neutralizing housing inflation.
Good elevator pitch. I reckon about 7 floors.
Exactly.
You don't want to go any higher than that because you're not in 20 floors buildings all the time.
Not
right?
at
So
all.
you need to,
Not at all.
You need to get it down.
Or a really slow lift.
All right, cool. Now, let's go into you and your history a bit.
Yes, sir.
So first up, where did you grow up?
Born and raised in near Orlando, Florida. Born in Miami, but grew up near Orlando, Florida.
I love Miami. Okay, and you are an American in Australia building a business that's predominantly focused on the UK, just so that we're clear right now.
Just so we're clear. So yeah, born and raised in the US. My mother's Australian, so I moved out here in the early 90s. Career in banking, investment banks, and commercial banks. And as you say, about 6 years ago, I came up with an idea that I just thought there was a better way to save for home deposits, and I've been working on building that since.
Cool. So I guess what first brought you over here? You obviously grew up in the US. Obviously, you got an Australian mum, you got the passport, you can do it. But what actually made you do it?
It's a short version, a long version. I'll go with the short version for the sake of the watchers. I was ready for a change. I was living in the US at the time, ready for a change. I had the second passport, and I'd always traveled a lot and always was keen to understand more about that Australian side of me. So moved out here in '98, figured I'd be here for a year or so, and then 26 years later, still here.
Yeah, well, I was 99 for a year. So it's a common story, right? There's a lot of people that moved out here for a year and never go back. And were you in banking back in the US previously?
Yes.
And had you ever had a business? Had any of your parents started a business? Was there any entrepreneurial sort of influence in your earlier life?
Well, great question. No, not necessarily. My father was.
Great question. No.
My father's a doctor, so he was a solo practitioner for years. So there's an aspect of an entrepreneurialness there and having his own practice, but certainly nothing to the scale of what I'm trying to do.
Okay, so what do you think that it was? You know, you've obviously worked over in the US. You've come over here. Life changed. You've stayed. You're in what is a pretty well-paid, stable career. What makes someone like that leave and start a business in an area that is not just complex? The regulatory and the barriers to overcome are almost mind-blowing, right? Almost mind-blowing.
Almost. Another great question. And sometimes I'd probably ask myself that same question when I'm trying to work through it. But look, I think for me, I've been doing this a long time, sort of 25 years plus in financial services in the US and in Australia. And ever since I've come up with this idea, I've just been so absolutely certain it works and it makes sense. And over the last 6 years, the product has evolved and gotten sharper and tighter how we position it, how we talk to politicians or civil servants about it. But the core idea hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It's saving for a home is hard, and there's nothing out there which looks after the saver.
And was that a problem that you experienced yourself, or was that a problem that you just saw a lot in terms of people trying to save for homes?
I was fortunate in my situation that I was in a well-paying job and was able to buy a house.
We're at the age where you can still buy houses when you're in your 20s as well. It wasn't completely out of the question.
30s, early 30s. But Steve, I was working at a major bank when I initially had the idea, and we collectively were reflecting on how do we get more early buyers or aspiring buyers into our ecosystem with the idea of adding additional product set. Yeah. You get them in, and then it's share of wallet from there. With the goal of being get a mortgage and then slap some credit cards on. And I'm sure there'll be other ways we can monetize that client. But at the time, all of the product set, the solutions didn't fit the problem.
Yeah.
Everything about, for the buyer, it's either you're safe or you take risk. And there was nothing which neutralized that risk. And as I said, I had the idea, and I thought we could find a way to solve for it.
Okay, so we're at a pivotal point in where PostLock is, which we'll come back to in a minute. Yeah. But you said the idea has been going for 6 years.
Yes.
How long was it in your head before you sort of really started to actually create something? And how long did it take you before you took the giant leap and left your business, left your current role?
Another good question. It probably was in sort of, call it incubation stage, side hustle concept for 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
Before I was able to really fully commit to it and make the leap. But it was always such a challenge for me because I was having these incredible engagements with, be it banks or politicians and civil servants, but my business card and LinkedIn always said something else.
Yeah.
So for me, when I was able to finally make the step, it was scary, but at the same time, it was liberating because I was like, now I can go hard. Now I can fully commit, and if we win or fail, at least I know I tried, and I certainly made sure that I've asked the question.
I like that. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I've done things on the side, and if it's not your number one thing on LinkedIn and people look you up, there's always this sort of doubt. Is he serious about it? Is he just wibbling on?
Absolutely.
Or all that kind of stuff? So it's in your head. It's incubating in your head. Did you try and sort of solve the problem from within, like within the bank that you were working? Did you actually try to do it there?
No, so not within the bank I was working at the time. Sorry for any of you guys, but not within the bank I was working at the time. Just didn't have the right sort of ecosystem, I thought, to do it. Approached a few different financial institutions, but they're just not set up to do something like this. And so I went to a few different financial institutions in Australia. And then by a little bit of luck and sort of through my network, I was introduced to someone from Mercer Consulting who said to me, the banks will never do it because they've got quarterly mark to market. And so they're not going to want the risk involved in having all of this assets and all this exposure. And so, but this individual said the real counterpart is government. Because for a couple of reasons, and now we can touch into it a bit more later, perhaps in the discussion. But government is the thing that government is. It takes forever.
It does.
It takes forever, and I can attest to that. But at the same time, as a counterparty, they're the best you want. They're the absolutely best counterparty there. There's nothing safer than investing your money backed by government. So it's government-backed savings. They're fully aligned. PostLock wants to get people into homes. Government wants to get people into homes. And they're not trying to rip out a fee on the way through. So the fact that we had identified a truly aligned partner, and then it's a matter of how do we position the product, shape the product, get the right engagement, get the right story behind it to get government to support it and bring it forward.
Absolutely. So let's get into the product a little bit, because I still think that people are sitting and going, how's it work? How's it work?
Exactly.
So I don't know how you want to do this. You can either sort of give me your spiel, or maybe why don't we create a real scenario, right?
Sure.
So let's live out the dream of a 20-year-old in Sydney going, right, I'm just starting to work. I'm out of uni. I'm 21, 20 years old. Got my first job. I'm still living at home, so I can save. How am I going to get what do I need now? At least $600,000 to buy a house.
Yes.
How does it work with you guys? Where would they start? If they came to you and said, right, I want to open up a PostLock account, which I'm doing what you're going to do.
Correct.
Explain to me how that's going to work.
Look, not to go too into the spiel, but the way I normally talk about it is most people, be it the American dream, the Australian dream, British dream about homeownership, it's inbuilt in our society.
It is.
Culturally, we all aspire to it. We all know what home feels like. When most people want to buy a home, they don't think, I want to buy anywhere in Australia. Like anywhere from sort of Perth to Queensland. It doesn't matter which state, don't really care where. Like nobody says that.
No one.
Most people say I would think when most people are starting their savings journey, they have a sense of where they'd like to live, a sense of where they'd like to start a family. And it's my belief that the closer you are, the more likely you probably know the suburb, there's a chance you know the street. You have this aspirational vision of where you'd like to spend your life, raise your family, put down your roots, and have that connection to the community.
People do, don't they? They really do.
But it's not, so this notion of normal savings products, apologies guys, these normal savings products that are out there, they're all, you go online and say, what's your savings target? And you might say, okay, let's say median home price is 600,000, and if you need 20% deposit, you need 120,000. But they'll have a little chart that says 120,000. But the brutal reality that they don't bother to tell their saver is that it's a moving target. Because as inflation keeps going, that 120,000 or that 600,000 for the principal keeps going up. So they're constantly falling behind.
Yeah.
So going back to your question, so aspiring saver, let's say aspiring saver lives out in, I don't know, let's say somewhere near Parramatta, decides they've got an area they like to live. They might have grown up near there somewhere. They select a suburb that they'd like to get exposure for.
Yep.
So they log on the PostLock website, select where they'd like to have their exposure. Then then what we do is they invest their money, and their money is securely with government. It doesn't sit with us.
Yep.
Because it's always been so critical to me. It can't be. We can't expect people at scale to give money to some random startup, right, or some random fintech. There's plenty of tiers with people who've done that in the past.
Oh.
But if we go out to the Australian populace, the UK populace, say you can invest your money safely with government, and we'll guarantee your return based on where you want to live, absolutely neutralizing that local property inflation, and hopefully restoring the belief that they actually can save, and that inflation won't be the reason that they can't achieve their dreams.
Yeah.
I mean, and what I always say, Steve, and it's savings sucks. Like no one wants to forego, no one wants to not have a holiday this year, live with their parents, they can save. But what PostLock's designed to do is ensure that when people do that, if people make that choice, are willing to do the work, that they'll get the reward of.
So that money is invested as opposed to saved, right?
Their money is placed with government, and government will then give them the return based on their local area.
And so they basically go, right, as a government, I'm just trying to get this right in my head, right?
Yes.
Let's say I'm Parramatta, right?
Yes.
Parramatta's median house price goes up X amount in 5 years.
Correct.
I get paid what? The standard rate of interest that the current, the bank rate or whatever it is, plus a rate of interest based on that suburb. And the government pays me that. Is that right?
Yes, and it's well framed. So I guess for those watching at home, the product design is really, there's two parts. We want a really strong base rate, and we're advocating using, say in Australia, we're using the RBA cash rate.
Yep.
A really, really strong base rate that people, if they go and look for term deposits, they can find that rate, but as opposed to a lot of banks will get them in with a teaser rate and then put them off into a lower rate later. We want to give them a really strong base rate so they don't have to guess. They don't have to jump around in different institutions and have that stress. And then they will identify the location they want the exposure for.
Yep.
And if they buy a home, that incremental return is paid to them. So to put that in context, so in Australia, the RBA cash rate is currently at 4.35%, and we're recommending a cap of 10% just to protect the taxpayers and protect government.
Yep.
So in your example, so if we have someone from Parramatta, if property's up 8% per year, they've got over 5 years while they're saving, they're earning 4.35%. So if they need to, their life changes, their plans change, they need to move overseas, they can get their money and they can access it. This can't be draconian.
Yep.
It can't have all sorts of hideous restrictions on it to make people not want to be there. But they can get their money they can withdraw money at that base rate. However, if they buy a home, then their money is not, their return is not at that 4.35, but they get the extra 3.65% to take them to 8%. So they've been able to keep up with Parramatta property.
Got it. Okay. And then the obvious things that jump into my mind are, right,
Yes.
well, maybe I don't want to buy in Parramatta. Maybe I want to buy in, I don't know, the Blue Mountains.
Yes.
But I say I want to buy in Bellevue Hill because I know Bellevue Hill's going to go up a lot more than the Blue Mountains. Do you have to buy in that suburb? And you only get that extra if you buy in that suburb.
Great question, and it's amazing, Steve. People always go there. And when I talk about PostLock, this notion of gaming the market
of course,
always comes out really, really quickly. There's a couple of things there in terms of this. PostLock is launched in partnership with government, and there's reasons why I think government may want to put restrictions on that and may choose not to. And I'll leave that for now. But this is not a tradable product because you have to, in order for the customer to actually get the excess return, or get that premium return, they've got to buy.
Yeah.
So in that example, you're living in Parramatta, you're saving in Bellevue Hill, you want to buy over here. We actually have all the data because there's only three factors. Where do you live? Where are you saving? Where'd you buy?
Yeah.
So one way we could mitigate it is by saying, if you don't live there and you didn't buy there, then you're gaming, and therefore you don't benefit from that excess return. However, frankly, I think we're philosophically, my view is that we do allow some flexibility, because I know people's lives change, and having to go through and work through all the exceptions. The exception managing could be a nightmare.
Oh, there could be. Imagine if you have to move. So you have to move to Queensland. Do you suddenly want to lose all that money? You want to buy in Queensland now, or because there isn't a house in Parramatta, because the market stuff, do you want to buy next door in Greystanes? So there's all those kind of things.
There absolutely will be exceptions built into this model, but for me, I just think it's around saying to people, let's just tell a story with us. So, I don't know, young boys, young kids living in Parramatta. He's saving for a home. He gets a job in the eastern suburbs, then wants to transfer his exposure to Randwick.
Yep,
that's totally fine. So he gets his return based on where he saved to that point.
Yep.
Then he transfers his return to Randwick. And then let's say, for example, he meets new partner, new job, decides to move to, moves out to the Katoomba. Then for me, as long as there's a story and a logic to it, then he should be able to benefit from the return on the way through.
Right, okay.
And it also is, one thing that often comes up is this notion that, I call it the premiumization strategy, that people say, oh, well, the premium suburbs always outperform the more expensive suburbs always outperform.
Not always on percentage, they don't.
Absolutely not. And what we've done is we did a couple of years ago, we looked at property across New South Wales. We looked at Victoria here in Australia. In the UK, we took a broad search all across the UK, even in terms of like different villages, as well as saying England, Wales, Scotland, over the 10-year period. And it's the premium strategy doesn't work. And so part of I guess my response to that, when government people say, well, we've got to protect ourselves from this. For me, it's like going back to that buyer. Let's say it's Johnny from Parramatta. Johnny's trying to buy. If Johnny decides to invest in get exposure for Bellevue Hill, and then buys in Lithgow, well, Johnny's taking risk. Johnny may get that wrong, and we can't protect Johnny from that.
No.
But if Johnny lives in Parramatta and then decides to buy in Lithgow, then we can protect him. Or if he knows he's going to be moving to Lithgow and wants to get exposure to Lithgow, then we can protect him from inflation in Lithgow.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, this is trying to help. This is an investment. It should be seen as an investment. And you just touched on something. You mentioned the UK. So I'll go to that now, because you've kind of progressed the business quite a bit further in the UK than you have in Australia. Yes, so first up, I'm intrigued as to why, because you don't have a passport for the UK. And secondly, let's talk about how far you've got there, because I think that's really important.
No, thank you, Steve. So I initially came up with the idea here in sort of late 2018. 2019, I started working with New South Wales government.
Yep.
We had made great traction with Treasury. The people at Treasury were fantastic with us. However, then we were quite close in early 2020 to getting in front of the right people at Treasury to potentially move it forward, and then COVID hit. So everything stopped for 18 months. It was a pretty brutal period for a lot of people, and I don't want to minimize the impact of COVID on a number of people's lives, but from a PostLock specific perspective, we went on pause.
Yep.
And then sort of from sort of late 21, early 22, we started working with a New South Wales-based lobbying firm, started engaging with the Liberal Party, the former government, the Parasite government here in New South Wales. We're getting great traction, and then had they won, we were well positioned. However, politically, we weren't positioned well with the other side.
Yeah.
And so the feedback I got, for those watching at home, in March 2023, the Liberal Party government in New South Wales lost to the Labor Party government. And some people that I knew on the Labor side said, look, you're not on their agenda. Come back and see us in 18 months.
Brutal.
And so then I pivoted to the UK. And the experience, Steve, in the UK has been extraordinary. So we've had incredible engagement across the UK. I think both in terms of central government, local government, bipartisan right from the start. We were well aware of the political landscape there, and having been burned perhaps in New South Wales. Right from the start, we wanted to make sure we were focused on not just the Conservative Party, which was ruling at the time, and has subsequently lost the election earlier this month, but we also worked with Labour as well. So as an example, I attended both the Conservative Party conference in Manchester and the Labour Party conference in Liverpool last year. And it was fascinating and incredible opportunity for me in both, as an American living in Australia, trying to impact UK housing policy, to actually be there amongst it, hearing what the local politicians are saying. But the amazing thing for me, the big takeaway, was that they're saying the same thing. Doesn't matter if you're a conservative or Labour, you're both parties, in it, be it Australia or in the UK, both parties want to be the party of homeownership. There's just not that many, they don't have the tools to do it. They're hamstrung on a number of fronts. And I believe they're both really incredibly receptive to new ideas about how to try to address this.
The government, bizarrely, is also more simplified there. There's not as many layers of government.
Yes.
Even though the population's about 10 times,
Yes.
there's a lot less government.
Yes.
Probably a lesson there for Australia somewhere. But,
Yes.
And so where is the business in the UK now? Where are you up to? Because you're far more progressed there than you are here, right?
So, I mean, that simplification, again, those watching, those of your viewers not as familiar with it, in Australia, you've got a strong state system and a federal system, whereas in the UK, it's much more centralized in central government. At Westminster, in London, there is strong local government and a little bit of, they call it devolution, but the funding, all the power, everything sits in Westminster, and it's enabled us to have a much better engagement with them, frankly. So to answer your question, we have a couple of key steps in terms of all this. Obviously, you need to do a lot. First and foremost, you got to talk to a lot of people. So I've probably been to the Palace of Westminster 30-something times. Like, I've spoken to so many MPs, Labour, Lib Dems, Scottish Nationals, Conservatives, just to get the idea out there, because we just want to socialize as much as we can. And then we've also been able to, so you have to get to with the politicians, but also civil servants. So in November last year, I met with the housing ministry, the housing team, the housing ministry, and they're fantastic. But to be fair, they said, look, you've got to get to Treasury because this is going to sit with His Majesty's Treasury. So in February of this year, we formally submitted a couple of key documents to the former UK government with executive summary, a paper written by a former Bank of England economist, all the bells and whistles you'd expect when submitting something formal. And as subsequent to that, I was given an opportunity to go to meet the housing team from His Majesty's Treasury in London, which was crazy but unbelievable experience. Like, they were brilliant, and they asked some great questions and were really receptive to the idea. So where we are now is, I feel we're in a really good position. Well, as of last Friday, I formally submitted the same documents to the new government. I'd sent it to them when they're in shadow. When they're in the shadow government, I've sent it to now that they're formally in government. But we formally submitted to the government of the day. We've had in-person meetings with Housing Ministry and Treasury. More important with Treasury, they sent us written questions, and we've responded back formally.
Yep.
So we believe we're on the desk for Treasury and housing as an idea that this new government can take and run with.
How exciting! How are you feeling? You look pretty energized.
Yeah, it's been a long road. I mean, there's been huge ups and downs, and it's one that the most extraordinary experience of my life. Absolutely.
And you're not even halfway there yet.
No, well, I don't know. I hope not. I mean, but look, I am so energized because I keep having these moments where, you've done it yourself. You start something and it always seems like a good idea at the time. Then you run into like headwinds and all sorts of challenges. But the thing that's been so comforting and reassuring about PostLock for me all the way through is it seems to continue to resonate. And as one of our key advisors in the UK says, no one ever says it's a bad idea. No one ever says it's dumb.
No.
No one, but they may not be able to get their head around it, but it's just a really sound idea, and it's resonating with the right people. So it gives me a lot of confidence that this government can take it and run with it quickly, because I think it provides them a couple of things. It provides them a mechanism to deliver something to those who need it quickly. Because it's a financial product, it's a matter of, let's say it's Jane from Manchester switching countries. If Jane's investing her money with government, and we're guaranteeing a return, we don't have to spin up a new department. We don't have to construct any buildings. It's a really easy product to execute.
Yep.
And get it going, deliver the value to people who are getting hurt by inflation currently, and with the benefits to come in the years, I guess in the later part of this government's term.
Look, I mean, maybe one of the upsides of this inflation that we're in at the moment, globally, where it's going through the roof, is that this might expedite your product, because it's becoming a greater problem. Because a lot of people, as you spoke about very much early on, are giving up. They genuinely are giving up. And if you go out into the world, you can see everyone's out there and they're holidaying and they're traveling and they're eating. And apparently that's what people are spending their money on that have given up saving for house deposits. That's what the things that I'm reading are saying. So maybe you can help solve that problem. And so you're raising capital right now, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So who are you looking to raise capital from? Are you looking for angels? Are you looking for VCs? Or are you looking for private equity? Where's your sort of head at? Because this, like you said, high regulation, a lot of complexity. You seem to have gotten through the real deep mud of it and coming out the other side, right? So who do you think's best to set to partner you here?
Luke, great question, and thank you for that one. It's for us, we really believe it's angels and high net worth family offices. We tend to, a lot of VCs we don't fit in a box. A lot of VCs have very discrete sort of mandates, things they like to look at. And there's never been anything like PostLock. So because it's such a differentiated product with government risk, it doesn't necessarily fit in the mandate for a lot of VCs, or certainly not private equity. But I think in our ideal world, we'd find maybe 2 to 4 family offices who care about property, who've got skin in the game in property, realize that this is a massive challenge, a huge impediment, and are able to provide not only funding, but that sort of the mentorship and advocacy to get this over the line.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, if anyone wants to, we'll definitely put some details in the bottom.
Thank you.
Tell me, this has been a journey, to say the least, right? And not a journey that a lot of founders go on in terms of the regulation overseas, all that kind of stuff, so early on. What do you reckon's been, and I'll come back to the hardest in a minute because I think that's easy. What's been the easiest thing that you've done?
Might need a tissue box. There might be some tears.
We don't have any. I think we have some tissues somewhere.
Surely.
But you went into this knowing there was a lot of regulation and you know government's slow. These were not surprises. So what do you think has surprised you the most? What's been the easiest thing that you've got through that you actually went in to do and you went, didn't see that being that easy? Was there anything that's really surprised you?
Look, there's good question. Thank you. I've met extraordinary people. There are people that I've met, titans of industry here in Australia, incredible people in the UK. I met the Prime Minister last year. Haven't met the new one yet. Look forward to it. But I've met people that I wouldn't get to. Yeah. In a traditional banking job, you work for a commercial bank, investment bank. You don't meet the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Not often.
You just don't. And you don't have. I met the Home Secretary the day I flew back from Rwanda late last year, which is crazy for me. And there's been so many times that I found myself, and my family can attest this, they'll watch this at some point, I just keep sending photos of Big Ben behind me and be like, I can't believe I'm here. And it's resonating, and the people I've been engaging with, be it, as I said, politicians, civil servants, think tanks, it resonates. I'm getting traction, and that part's been the most extraordinary thing for me. My Rolodex, if you will, is just not what it was when I started this.
I wonder how many people don't understand that term, Rolodex. I was just thinking about that.
True.
You and I
dated myself.
I think there's got to be some out there who don't go, what the heck's a Rolodex?
Yeah, I can fax you the definition.
We'll put that in the description below as well. I guess, have you got any advice for anyone who potentially has an idea that maybe is it, because there's a lot of socially conscious founders out there right now. There's a big push for this, right? But a lot of those socially conscious things do require government support to actually achieve them. And a lot of people would not do that or would not take that step for that very reason and some of the problems that you've encountered. You got any advice for anyone who might be sitting there thinking about that?
I just feel like I should wait till I get it done before.
I think you've a couple of years of experience on most people, so I think you've got something to offer.
I think it's. I guess for me, I've worked with a lot of big institutions. So I work with the New York Stock Exchange. I work with major investment banks. A couple of the big commercial banks here. Working with government's no more or less challenging than working with big institutions. So I don't know that government necessarily should be a barrier to entry, and I think the challenge, going back to the start of when we started engaging with New South Wales Treasury here in Australia, is that it's making sure you get your messaging right. It's understanding, as with anything, what's in it for them, why do they care? Yep. And as long as you can really frame why they care, be it for stamp duty revenue volatility, be it lack of ability to engage with young voters, there's whatever the framing is from them, as long as you can package it up correctly. From my I guess experience, they've been pretty receptive.
It's interesting to hear your story. It doesn't. It seems like you've had a relatively good reception. It's just the process that you've got to go through to get to the other side, right? And the process is government. Government is process, as they say.
Yes.
So you've just got to keep plugging away.
Yes, but I think it's as I said, like I think we're fortunate. We have as much of a challenge it is, use whatever analogy, like the swimming upstream, headwinds with working with government. They call it the home affordability crisis for a reason. There's millions of people that have every right, be it in Australia, UK, Ireland, Canada, the US, have every right to be frustrated with the fact that their lot in life isn't as good as their parents were. The economic package they got isn't as good because there's been this disconnect between assets and wages. So the aspect of, we talked before about people on holidays, the disparity of the haves and have-nots is probably stronger than it's ever been.
Absolutely.
And PostLock is unequivocally a product for the have-nots. Like this isn't a product, and a lot of our product design is, this isn't a product for your high-flying bankers to buy an $8 million place in the North Shore. Like,
no.
We're not designed for that. This is a design for people, your public sector employees, the middle class, lower middle class, giving them a chance to get on the housing ladder, if you will, and ensuring that and giving them hope that they can get a better outcome.
When you get this done, you will become famous. There'll be the Zilioli effect. You will have solved the housing affordability crisis in 2 countries.
Steve, it's what I would say is like, this is not a solution. This is not the solution. And I think that's part of the thing that's really, I believe, resonated with government as well. Like, this is just a part of it.
Yep.
Helping people save for deposit is only part of, like, we can help get them on the ladder. But there's supply challenges here and over in many of the Western, I guess, economies. There's supply challenges, planning challenges. There's the YIMBYs, the NIMBYs. There's a myriad of reasons why buying a house is harder than it's ever been. And I think where we really feel our place is we believe a really powerful solution for government to help address part of it, but it has to be where we'll get the best outcomes is if it's with a government that understands the power, not just of what we're doing in terms of helping Johnny or Jane save for a deposit. Like, that's the easy bit.
Yep.
But it's everything else that we can perhaps deliver in terms of one of the things that we believe will bring to the table with all this is a unique data set.
Yeah.
That, because you look at, I know the Min's government started with plans to launch, huge housing targets, and they scaled them back. In the UK, governments have struggled with housing targets for years. The current government has got an incredibly aggressive target. They're targeting 1.5 million homes, new homes over the next 5 years, but housing starts going down. And but you have, in order to get that 1.5 of 5 years, 300,000 per year is required. The last time they built more than 300,000 houses in the UK, Star Wars was the #1 movie in the world.
That's the 70s.
So since 1977, that was the last time they hit 300,000. And this government is saying they're going to deliver it. And right now, housing starts are going down, not up in the UK. So be it the UK or Australia, what PostLock will deliver is a data set that doesn't exist. And this is, in some respects, I think is the most powerful thing we're bringing. Like, yes, we're a better way to save for a deposit. Absolutely. But for governments, we're bringing something that's going to enable them to know who the people are, where they live now, what they want to buy, where they want to buy, and most importantly, when they'll be able to buy it.
Yeah.
So true forward-looking demand will enable governments to make much more informed decisions around supply. And both in terms of housing stock, infrastructure, schools, roads, et cetera. There is no data set that provides the insight that PostLock will deliver.
Well, look, I think it's awesome that you're even taking it on. I think it's even more awesome how far you've got.
Thank you.
Congratulations and keep going.
Absolutely.
And I hope that this hopefully gets you some help in terms of funding and gets some people interested in that talking as well. And we are definitely going to follow this journey and have you back on as it progresses on.
Absolutely. I'd love that.
Steve, thank you so much for sharing with us. I just think it's awesome.
Thank you.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed that. There is hope. There are people out there trying to help you buy your houses. So please do click in, have a look at PostLock, do follow Steve and see how his journey goes. Thanks for watching this week. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.